Welcome to the Regen Brands podcast. This is a place for consumers, operators, and investors to learn about the consumer brands supporting regenerative agriculture and how they're changing the world. This is your host, Kyle, joined with my co-host, AC. Let's dive in.
On this episode, we have Paul Greive, who is a co-founder and the vice president of sales and marketing at Pasturebird. Pasturebird is supporting regenerative agriculture through their pastured poultry products that are raised using their proprietary high-tech mobile chicken coops. In this episode, we learn about Pasturebird's origin story, the company's North Star of scaling pastured poultry to the masses, why chickens actually should eat grains, and how Pasturebird found an ideal partner in Perdue Farms. Paul's one of my favorite folks in the space, and he is always dropping knowledge bombs. There's plenty to be had in this episode. Let's go.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We are really fired up about this episode of the Regen Brands podcast. We got my man, Paul Greive from Pasturebird. Paul was one of the first people that Kyle and I talked about when we were sitting at the coffee shop talking about the Regen Brands podcast. So pumped to have you here with us, brother. Welcome.
Thank you, man. Right, of course, right as a helicopter flies overhead. Sorry about that. Good to be here, dude. I'm really stoked. I'm stoked. I've been looking forward to this.
Nice. Well, Paul, just to get us started, man, I mean, for those that don't know what Pasturebird is at all, tell us a little bit about, what is Pasturebird, what you guys do.
Yeah, so we've become like a pastured poultry company. Our whole thing is about producing really good chickens for meat. And our main differentiator is that instead of like a stationary housing system, we have a mobile housing system where the birds are living on the actual pasture, and then we move them to a fresh spot every single day. That's been done for like 40 years in the US, even longer in Europe, but we kind of have been working on figuring out how to scale that and to bring it to the masses.
That sounds incredible. And so, couple right now, like, how long have you guys been in business? When did you start doing this? Why did you start doing this? How long have you been working with chickens? Give us the background.
Yeah, so in 2012, we kind of like started as a backyard hobby. I was getting back from Iraq. I had contracted Lyme disease as a sniper in the Marine Corps, and just like started feeling like crap. And paleo started to get pretty popular, probably 07, 09, something in there. And I just never thought I would like start a food company or whatever, but kind of came back from Iraq. My family was like, dude, we can't find like good chicken anywhere in the grocery store. So we just got 50 birds for the backyard and had no intention on it becoming a business. I was living in Newport Beach with my wife, had like I was like a normal guy kind of vibe, and sure enough,
I grew up in Southern California.
Okay.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I grew up in Southern California, like going like really close to Newport Beach. Like, how did you even keep 50 chickens in that yard? Were you allowed to do that from like a zoning perspective?
At one point we had like 5,000 birds, and people would be like, how do you have a farm? Because we lived in Corona Del Mar. They'd be like, how do you have a farm in CDM? And we'd be like, no. The farm is at my in-laws' place in Temecula. And like, we lived in Newport, but the farm was way out in the country. So
nice.
It was gnarly though, because I was working as a CPA, and I was actually doing my MBA stuff up at UCLA. And then I was like, we were kicking this farm off all at the same time. So it was so gnarly for a period, but it was like the thing where 50 birds, like, we thought we would have them for our family. And I put a couple things up on social, and they all just kind of like sold out really fast. So then we did 100 the next month, and then we did like same thing, and then 200, and then 500. And then pretty soon, about a year in, me and my brother-in-law Jeff were like quitting our jobs, and we moved into this little 1,700 square foot house with like 9 of us. And we were like, dude, let's just reinvest every penny of profit and like just give it a go, So it was a really gnarly time for a while.
That's incredible. Now, and how do you go from backyard chickens to mobile units that you're working with Perdue and trying to scale this thing? Like, what does that education curve look like?
I mean, Joel Salatin pioneered this like in the 1960s in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. So he's built this like portable, floorless, 80 to 100 bird system that you pull by hand. And so we just geeked out on his stuff, and we loved him and what he stood for. And so we did those little hand pull systems for like the first 3 or 4 years, harvested in the backyard, like just, there's probably 900 to 1,000 pastured poultry farmers in the U.S. and then several abroad too that have this like Joel Salatin style model. It's really low barrier to entry. It's really great for a small piece of land, but when you're out there for several years, like pulling these things by hand, eventually you just go, dude, there's got to be a better way to do this, you know? So then we moved up into like a larger greenhouse system. So we modified this greenhouse from Cobb Creek Farms. And it's basically a greenhouse on skids that instead of like 100 birds, you could put 600 birds in because it was a lot bigger. And it's all the same impact because it's the same stocking density, same rest period. And it was just a lot more efficient. So our wheels started turning. We're like, dude, if we just made this big of an efficiency pickup, like I kind of wonder what you could do if you continue to scale this, you know. And we still have a family brand called Primal Pastures. It's all about kind of gold standard, you know, only pasture raised, soy free, certified organic, all the way Regen, like really, really dope. But what we were finding is that the price point required to be sustainable and like financially regenerative is so high that I was just like, dude, I didn't come up, you know, wealthy at all. I came up square in the middle class, and like my parents couldn't have afforded the food that we were producing. It was just a bit of a bummer, and there was like no distribution on it. And I was like, all right, I feel like that's a cool brand. It's a cool mission, but we got really excited about this idea of making, you know, nutrient dense, like regenerative meat more accessible, more affordable. So that was the genesis of Pasturebird. And we actually kind of like broke the two companies because they had two really different missions. And me and Jeff took Pasturebird, and my other brother-in-law, Rob, and our father-in-law, Tom, they took Primal. And, you know, no bad blood or whatever. It was just like, it's hard to run in two different directions under one umbrella, you know? So we broke Pasturebird. We went out and got some investment like 2015, and the mission really became like scaling pastured poultry.
And at that point in time, Paul, did you know that that was going to have to be some sort of tech-enabled deal, or did you just not know that and you knew you wanted to scale it? I mean, where was your head at? What were you going to try and do with that money?
Yeah, we were so naive, and this is common in the startup world, but like we didn't know any better. So we're just like, dude, let's just raise enough money to like build out a independent chicken company, you know? I think our first check was like $250K from the original angels, and we were like, dude, you know, for us it was like a lot of money at the time, and it was like, here we go, like we're starting to, you know, we're gonna vertically integrate, we're gonna do all this stuff, and then pretty soon we realized, no, you need more like 50 to 100 million to even think about your own, you know, slaughterhouse and feed mill, and that's not even really doing a great job with that. So I would say it took us like 2 or 3 years. We had some early investors that were kind of like, you sure you want to be like a chicken company? Like maybe you should focus on the coops, you know? And we didn't even have the idea for this fully autonomous, like solar powered coop yet. So it was all iterative, you know, like we didn't have some grand master plan, but we did kind of know it would make sense to team up with another poultry company pretty early on when we started seeing what it would take to like bring scale in. We just thought it would be a West Coast poultry company. We didn't really know about Perdue. I didn't spend a lot of time on the East Coast, so I didn't really think about them as a potential partner. But yeah, that all sort of fell into place in the right timing, you know?
And what was like the light bulb moment on the tech side that got you to where you are now, where like this chicken coop is like something out of NASA? Like this is not your average chicken coop, and we'll put some links in the show notes, but what was like the light bulb moment there?
Okay, I would say there was two. So one was an actual realization that it sounds dumb. It sounds like really simple, but the way that we always did it was a greenhouse, and we would pull it long ways, right? So say you have like a 60-foot by 20-foot greenhouse. We would pull those birds 60 feet every day. And that was just the way everything was oriented. And that's the way everybody did it in the space. But the birds really like don't love walking that far. It takes a really long time to walk them that far. You know, they got like these little 4 or 5 inch legs. So walking them 60 feet, like it's pretty time intensive, you know? But when we realized like, no, let's switch all the gear and let's move them 20 feet instead of 60. And the bigger that we make these coops makes it so that we can afford stuff like automation, you know, lighting, feed pans, we can put solar on it. Like the more birds that we can spread that cost over, the better really. So that was the big one. Like moving it horizontally instead of vertically was a huge, it sounds stupid, but it was such a huge game changer for like the space. And then the other big one was actually a hire. So I'm not an engineer, dude. I'm kind of like a numbers guy, and I was a farming, on the boots on the ground guy. But I had this dream for like this large scale thing, and I couldn't really crack the nut on how to do it. I was trying to figure it out, but this guy Dan Cody, who had managed poultry at White Oak, he'd spent time at Polyface, and then he was also at Cobb Creek at one point. So he'd like done the pastured poultry thing for a good 10 years. He's a biochemistry PhD, many patents to his name, like such a bright dude,
Love
and we had a chance to bring him on as like our first really big key hire. And he shared the vision for 1 million birds a week raised on pasture and just healing like large amounts of cropland in a crop animal integration. And so we just teamed up, and he became like a huge part of the team. And he's super smart with all the engineering stuff and welding and bolts and just, all the things you got to know to put something like this together. So Dan was like the huge breakthrough, I think, for me and Jeff as founders,
That's awesome. So I'm going to rewind a little bit and just talk, more about where Pasturebird's at today. What do you produce? Where do you sell? Where can people find Pasturebird if they're interested and want to like try your brand for the first time?
Yeah, so we started out producing in the Temecula Valley, which is like pretty much inland from Orange County, California, north of San Diego, south of LA. It's been a great home base and a great place to like launch a business, but it is not like a cost-effective place to do farming. There's a reason why there's like no livestock down here at all,
Or do anything else for that matter.
Maybe not. I don't know. Cannabis seems to be doing pretty well out here, but other than that, it's hard to make money in agriculture,
A little bit different margin profile on that commodity.
Exactly. Right. So we've expanded the business with Perdue. We've expanded the business out to Georgia, which feels like a really good pocket for doing cost-effective production. It rains there, which is a big advantage. Land prices are better. We have a really good plant that we can operate out of there. But we do still have the ranch in San Diego County. And then we're looking at Northern California potentially too for some expansion stuff. So that's kind of like where the production profile is. We're really like, we cut our teeth in food service, even though that's not where you would think for this type of a product. It was just because we were severely undercapitalized. We didn't have a lot of retail experience, and like putting up bulk product into 40-pound boxes and selling it into great restaurants is it's a pretty easy way to crack into the business. If you have something that tastes good and eats good and all that, we're lucky that we do. I feel bad for like my grass-fed beef brothers and homies where it's just like, it's really hard when the product, a lot of times it's an inconsistent eating experience, and it's like kind of tough and it's kind of gamey or whatever. So we're blessed to not have that problem within pastured poultry. Like the product eats head and shoulders above what kind of like the conventional stuff does. So we're lucky in that sense, and we could break into restaurants, and we're just finally now, so like 10 years really in, we're finally breaking into retail. And we're really excited to kind of like be in a lot of the specialty and hopefully some of the bigger guys within the next, it's really like down to weeks at this point. So we're in Jimbo's, we're in like Oliver's Market up in the Bay Area, a lot of these smaller specialty guys. And as this grows, like we would really like to see it expand into probably not, the Walmarts of the world, but like I really do, 10 years from now, I'd love to be seeing this in like a Trader Joe's and some of the more just accessible, affordable places where regular everyday people shop,
Yeah,
well, we need
that's
that.
awesome.
We need that so bad for Regen. Paul, wasn't one of like your first breaks into food service, like getting into the Lakers or like getting into professional sports and like selling them basically a better nutrient dense product for their athletes?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually like our first ever wholesale account. So it's a gnarly story because we're all sports guys. I came up baseball and track and field, and my two brothers-in-law are both college basketball players, and it was just like, it felt like we left that world and we went into like the ag world, but the two worlds came back and collided. We got a call from Kate Shanahan, who you probably know. She plays in this world some as a dietitian, nutritionist. She's a big speaker and stuff, but she was looking for the best like animal proteins, most nutrient dense animal proteins that she could find. This is back when we had Kobe and Steve Nash towards like the end of their career, and they were into ancestral wellness and bone broth and all that. And
Yeah.
they found us, and I thought it was like a prank call, but they're like, "Hey, we're from the Lakers. We're interested in your meat. Can we come for a farm tour?" And we were like, "Bro, are you serious?" And so like the team chefs came down and nutritionists came down, and they like fell in love with the whole moving animals to fresh pasture and like the way we were doing it and all that. So they started ordering, not for the stadium, but for the team. And that was our first ever time wholesaling, because before that was all direct to consumer.
Wow.
And we're like, bro, this is so dope. We got to go up and meet Tim DiFrancesco, who was the strength and conditioning coach there. Got to tour the locker room and watch him practice. Like we walked in and saw AD. It was so dope to see some of that, like as sports guys. And then right after that, I don't know if you've heard of Gabe Kapler, but he was a strength and conditioning coach at the Dodgers. And those two, like the Lakers and Dodgers, they talk. So right after we got the Lakers locked up, we started working with the Dodgers too, and we got to go see Aegon, and like we walked in, got to walk the bullpen and the dugout, and like it was a surreal moment, and it was such a vote of confidence, even though it wasn't a huge order or whatever. It was like, this is pretty dope. Like these professional athletes that rely on this as fuel for their bodies, like they're recognizing it. And a huge thing in the startup thing is just teetering on having confidence and then like losing confidence. It was just a huge vote of confidence more than anything else. And then the only problem with that story is it ends. The Lakers had a franchise record horrible year that year, like the worst year the Lakers have ever had, the year that we worked with them.
No.
So it's like, shit, like hopefully it wasn't a chicken,
Definitely could not have been the chicken. Must have been something else.
Had to be
but
the
it probably
beef,
gave you like a seal of approval too. When you're like cracking the nut for food service and you're walking in and you're like, hey, the Lakers buy this bird because it's the most nutrient dense. I'm curious, did you guys have any data or research that supported your nutritional profile versus like conventionally grown chicken at that time? Or how did you end up popping up on her radar?
It was kind of weird. There's some studies that are published about daily move pasture poultry in general, and it shows like that's where you see a lot of the like 21% less saturated fat, 50% higher vitamin A and E, 3 times higher omega-3. Like a lot of that comes from Barb Gorski's 2001, I think, old actually study on daily move pasture poultry. The funny thing is, it's like know your audience. So because we're cracking into food service, the second you start talking about nutritional profile, like their eyes just gloss over. They could care less, So like you have to talk about taste and flavor and texture and like moisture. Like that's what they care about. I don't think that's what Kate was really. We didn't have anything published at that time. I think she's so smart and she's been in this game for so long. Like she knew animals that live on grasslands, not on their own poop, would be healthier, And so she just like inherently knew that, probably more than I did, to be honest.
Right. Crazy.
She's legit. Like look her stuff up. She's written several books. She speaks a lot. She's really, really good.
Yeah. So Paul, let's go into like what is regenerative pastured poultry? We want to talk about kind of like difference between monogastric animals and non-monogastric, and just really want to, especially for like super beginners here on that are listening, like what do you guys do that's different? Why is it regenerative? And we'll start there, and then we can kind of go off that.
Yeah, I always say we're actually I would say we're not really regenerative yet. It's really simple and straightforward when you're in a ruminant animal, right? Because there's no off-site feed coming in. It's just like really straightforward. And to me, regenerative is, did you leave it better than you found it? Like super simple. And it's real easy to look at a cattle ranch or sheep where it's just one farm, and you can say like, is organic matter coming up? Is there more biodiversity? Are you sequestering carbon? Like it's real simple. Monogastrics gets real tricky because there's essentially like 2 sides of the operation, right? So you have your farm where you have the animals, but then you have where all the feed is coming from too. And so to me, I don't feel real comfortable saying, yeah, full circle regenerative ag until you're healing soil on where you have the animals and where the feed's coming from. And like, I think what we're doing on the farm side with the animals, it's certainly regenerative. Like I could show you soil samples dating back to 2017 where we're less than 1% on like an abandoned potato field that's over 3% now with amazing carbon profile. And like, we've done a lot, but I think there's still a lot of innovation happening in like the Gabe Brown kind of cropping world. and it needs to keep happening, you know? So like our feed side is not figured out yet. You know, we're still buying not really conventional feed, but I wouldn't call it regenerative feed yet. So I don't really feel comfortable saying like, oh yeah, we're right there with the cattle dudes that are doing this full blown regenerative ag program yet. Like, no, props to them, bro. Like they're really doing it. I think we're on the pathway, but I hate when people make these like monogastric regenerative claims, you know, because I don't think we're really there. I think the way that we're doing regenerative is by moving 6,000 bird coops to fresh pasture every day. So over the course of a bird's life, it's going to shit about 2.5 pounds, right? In a stationary system, which is like 99.999 something percent of poultry, all that poop is going into one place. And at best, maybe you're pulling it out once or twice a year and you're like spreading it onto a crop field, you know? And you could say that for, it's not a knock against these guys. It's just the way it's been done for like 70 years in this country, you know? And even a lot of the guys that say they're doing pasture raised and regenerative, like they're still using stationary systems, which is just limiting the animal's ability to like influence grassland or cropland, you know? So our whole thing is about, you know, how do we move those animals every single day? How do you spread that manure out over a grassland to a system where it's like actually a benefit more than it is a liability? And I think the pasture poultry movement has figured that out. What we've kind of done special is we figured it out at scale, so we can affect broadacre, you know, and we're working on like corn and cotton and wheat fields and stuff in Georgia. And it's like, that's super exciting to me, where we can jump in a rotation with a crop and we can like actually be part of that holistic kind of like approach. But the feed thing still has a lot of room for improvement, you know? And so I don't like pretending like we're there yet or like we've arrived, because I think that there's still a lot of room to do better there.
Yeah. I love your humility. You're definitely regenerative on the animal side, so I'm gonna give you some props there. I think the feed thing is definitely noted, and you're totally right there. And I respect the fact that you're that aspirational, because you will figure it out, and we'll all be better off because of it. The before and after pictures y'all post are just insane, and we'll link some in the show notes as well. But it's nuts. So just congrats to you on that. And can you share, you know, what are you actually feeding the animals, and what does their diet like really consist of, and how that compares to more conventional practices?
Yeah, so I always say like first and foremost, because they're living on, you know, every bird moves to a fresh spot every single day. So we're working with the land and market guys, the ecological outcome verification, and they actually just came out. They did a whole poll, and I think they counted something like 30 different species of, you know, perennial, annual grasses, forbs, legumes. Like, it's biodiverse. It's really rich. So first and foremost, it's like the birds are munching on as much green material, and don't discount like the amount of bugs and worms and little micro insects that they're finding in that environment too. So that's like, I don't know, 30 different plants and then probably 20 or 30 different insects that they're getting after. But it's not a fully nutritional profile for like a modern broiler chicken. They can't just live off of grasses and bugs alone. It's a common misconception. Broiler chicken, or all poultry species, have what's called like a crop and a gizzard. And it's actually an organ that's meant to take in grains. It stone grinds the grains and it sprouts them to make them more nutritionally available to their system. So where I would say, you know, a ruminant animal is really like never meant to have.
Repeat that, Paul. That is, yeah. I've never heard that. Repeat that for everybody, because I've never heard that once.
Avian species, like all poultry, have a crop and a gizzard. And it's I wish I had one, because it would make me tolerate grains a lot better than I do, you know. But it takes the grains, it literally like it stone grinds them. So inside of the gizzard is a bunch of rocks that the birds will eat in the field, or that you can add it to their feed. And then that actually gets like ground up inside of their body. Whereas, you know, I don't have that, so I don't get that ground up. And then it actually will sprout those grains inside their system before it goes into the rest of the digestive tract. So like grains are totally species appropriate for chicken, where they're not for beef. And it's like a really common thing where we'll have people be like, hey, you know, can you guys do like a grain-free chicken? And it's like, well, it takes a lot of explaining and it kind of sucks, but it's like, you know, chickens are really not meant to never eat grains like beef cattle are, or whatever. So yeah, in addition to like the pasture and the bugs and worms and all that, we do have a corn and soybean ration that the birds are offered as free choice. And they eat like a good amount of that. You know, I don't like to pretend like They just eat a tiny bit. Like they eat about as much as a conventional bird would. The difference is because they're exercising so much more in our environment, it just becomes a lot more nutrient dense product where they're eating a huge varied diet of like grasses, bugs, seeds, worms, flowers, and the grains. And I think that makes a really different product, you know?
And they're not living in their own shit. I mean, that's very important to me. Like, we all consume 99.9% of the chicken we consume lives in its own filth, which is unacceptable.
I mean, it is what it is. Like, is it unacceptable?
Yeah.
Sure. But is that like where the industry sits right now? Yeah. I mean, it's like an unfortunate thing.
I don't
and
blame
I think
the farmers.
You got a lot of people trying to do better. So here's where it went from like iterative to revolutionary to me is like, you go with, you know, an outdoor access system. You know, so what that is a 600-foot long barn, 40-foot wide, 20,000 birds, and you add some doors to the side, or you switch the breed to make it so they're going to access the outdoors like a little bit more. Like people say, you know, it's bullshit. Like, I can't believe they do that. Well, no, like it is an improvement, you know, like I applaud anybody trying to do better for the food system. And like, is outdoor access better than no outdoor access? Like, hell yeah, like awesome. You know, I totally support that, but it's not a revolution where I feel like moving animals to a new spot every day. That is the revolution. And like, you go back 200 years pre-antibiotics, like it was kind of impossible to keep animals living in the same spot forever. Like our ancestors would have been like, that's not even possible, bro, to like keep chickens or cattle or anything in a feedlot. That was just not even medically possible. You had to move animals to a new spot all the time. Otherwise it would not survive. So this isn't new tech or a new idea. Like animals have moved forever. It's really only the last 70 years that we're able to even keep them in one place, you know?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And this sort of like a general theme with regenerative agriculture. It's like all this innovation, but really it's like kind of going back to the way agriculture was, you know, pre-industrial revolution.
Yep, exactly.
It makes a lot of sense. But, you know, when we, just to touch on the feed, I got two more questions about feed. Number one, like if you were to estimate what amount of the dietary intake for a chicken is the feed versus forage, I'd be really curious to know that number. And then you mentioned corn and soy. Why are those the two feed grains that you choose to supply for the chicken?
I'll start with the second one first. So like, it's what's kind of done in the industry. Primal Pastures does a no corn and no soy feed. It's kind of cool. Like it hits some of the marketing wickets. To be perfectly honest, I don't think it really creates a really different bird or anything. But people are looking for that kind of a product. So it's kind of interesting from that standpoint. With Pasturebird, the goal being like cost-effective pasture poultry, we were kind of like, look, we want to build a system that moves 6,000 birds to fresh pasture. And then we want to kind of like just produce what the market's asking for. So we said we're sort of agnostic to breed and feed. Like we could go certified ROC and the price is going to be X with a slow growth heritage breed. Or we could go, you know, no antibiotics ever in like a Cornish cross kind of breed, and then the price is going to be X. And so far, what it feels like is the market is asking for cost-effective pasture poultry, which is going to be kind of like that non-GMO, no antibiotics ever, in maybe not the fastest growing breed possible, but like a relatively commercialized breed. And so just for our company's mission statement of like making it more accessible, that feels like the right combo right now. But if consumers want to pay a little more, they want a little slower growth breed, or they want like, you know, differentiated certified organic or ROC feed, like, dude, sign me up. Like I would love to produce that program. I want to move the needle at the end of the day. Like I want to be able to move the needle. So what was the first question though? Because I know I answered, there was two questions in there.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that answer. And it sheds a lot of light and like clarity on, you know, I mean, number one, how many different options there are in what you're doing. You know, there's so many different ways you could change the breed, you could change the feed, you could, you know, do things differently to try to meet different market demands, which is really, really interesting. You know, it's not as simple as just raise a chicken. But the first question was, what percentage of caloric intake is from forage versus feed?
I've heard estimates like 75-25 feed versus pasture. I don't know, bro. And it also depends, like, why look at calories? Why not look at nutrient intake? Why look at like, when I sit there and I observe the birds, right? And we run like live feeds. So some days we'll just start first thing in the morning, and we'll run a live feed till the end of the day. When I look at the birds, I see them foraging like 90% of the day and maybe hitting the feed pans for about 10. So it's like there's a lot of calories in that corn and soy kind of mix, right? But there's a lot less nutrients. So it's like, I don't really know how to answer that question, but it's probably something like 75% of their calories are coming from the feed ration, 25%. But then nutrient density might be exact opposite of that, where I would hypothesize it's something like 70-30 of their nutrition would actually come from the field, and then less is coming from the feed, which is, to me, it's just like why these birds that are just living indoors, they're only hitting the feed pan. Like, and even in the outdoor access system, you know, they're really not spending a lot of time outside. Maybe, you know, we looked at studies that are somewhere between like 1% and 5% of their life, kind of in like optimal, perfect free range outdoor access, what some companies would call pasture raised system, where they're spending that like a small amount of their life actually outside. Outside doesn't necessarily mean on regenerating pasture. Like, I've seen a lot of those outdoor areas that look like either barren, you know, denuded ground, or maybe like a putting green.
Dirt.
If they're spending time outside. If they're not spending time outside, you can get it to look really green and lush because you're not getting any animal impact at all, you know. But it's a real weird game out there, dude. It really is a weird game. And like, I always just go back to full respect and full props to anybody trying to like do better in the food system. I feel like a lot of times we talk about how we're different or how we can like see a positive vision for the future, and it sounds like I'm talking shit on what other people are doing. That's not like my intention at all. I want to bring the whole vibe up all the way, but it is important to like be able to talk about how you're different too. So it's real tricky, you know.
Yeah, it's hard not to be like holier than thou and finger wag in this space when you like push Regen a lot, but I think it's important to always kind of end with like producers and consumers, and kind of the whole system does what it does because the system has incentivized like that behavior. So it's not like really any one actor's fault. Like, it's a system problem that we need to continue just to push and do innovative things and encourage it, like you just talked about. So I love that approach.
Well, and look, I always come back to this
like
too, because a lot of times people be like, yo, like, why are you guys working with big ag? Like, aren't those the bad guys or whatever? And I always just answer that with like, dude, big ag just gives people what they're willing to pay for, right? So for whatever, 50 years in this country, people asked big ag to produce cheap chicken, and like they did a really, really good job. So I had like no shade at, you know, the dudes that have been innovating and trying to bring costs down in poultry, because we have really affordable poultry in this country. But now the thing that's cool is like consumers are asking for something different. They're asking for, you know, nutrient density, and they're asking for something that's better for the planet. So guess what? Like big ag, you know, they start to like turn their head towards that. And they're like, oh, what's this? You know, this might be something that we're interested in. And so I'm really proud of Perdue as a company who could have just gone the way of greenwashing like so many other do. But instead they're like, no, we want to produce like an authentic version of what people are asking for. And they came in and they teamed up with us, and like major props to them, you know. And I hope more big ag goes that way and teams up with like these grassroots companies to bring something really uniquely different. Like, I think it's really important. I think it's just as important as all those backyard, local farmers market style producers. I think we got to get big ag to like adopt some of these regenerative practices if we want to see it like better in our lifetime. You know, I want to leave a better system for my kids than what I had. So I think big ag has to be part of that conversation, you know.
Yeah,
I think it's huge that you acknowledge that. And, you know, one of the things that I think Anthony and I are both really passionate about is how does Regen scale? How do we get more adoption? And to your point, like villainizing big ag isn't the method, because at the end of the day, they own 99% of the agricultural land in the United States. So working with them, to me, doesn't devalue
them in China,
your product.
bro.
It helps to bring their product up higher. Yeah, right. So yeah, I really appreciate that sentiment of like wanting to work with big ag, because at the end of the day, like if you can get them to adopt these better regenerative systems, that's going to move the needle way faster than all the other operations. And that's not to say that everybody has to go that route, but there's so much more potential when you work with partners versus, you know, trying to beat everybody else out and like work competitively in this market.
For sure.
It's just really, really cool to see.
Well, and it goes to like the power of the consumer. When you demand something different for long enough, like then, you know, people start to listen after a while. So it's like, dude, I think the ultimate power rests in that dollar. And it's like every little decision, you know, you vote 3 times a day kind of thing. It's corny, but it's true, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I force myself to go to Walmart and Costco every week, like on my Saturday, Sunday, Monday, like shopping run, because I want to see what the assortment is. I want to see what kind of options they're carrying, because we're not doing anything until there's like a heavy Regen like presence in stores like that are serving like that mass consumer.
Yep.
So I couldn't agree with you there more. And it's not about condemning anyone for what's happened in the past. It's about engaging the largest players to do better, because we're screwed if we don't. Straight up.
And
We will not accomplish anything if we don't.
check this out. Guess who the largest retailer in the world is for certified organic produce?
Probably Walmart or Costco.
Walmart. It's Walmart. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
say what you want, dude, but they're moving that volume, and they're the ones that are going to move the needle. So it's like, if they want to play for real, I'm not saying like we help them greenwash and like do a lot of things that the industry has been guilty of in the past, but if they actually want to do things differently, like, we're idiots to say, oh no, we're holier than thou, like we're not going to work with big ag, we're this and that. Like, I don't know, bro. I just think it's really short-sighted as us, as like the dudes in the regenerative and gals in the like the regenerative golden age, which is what we're in right now, to like reject or shun these bigger companies that want to check it out and try to do better. Like, that's us. Like, that's our role, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And they have so much knowledge and resources and experience that like we can lean on. So that's another thing. But we could riff on this topic for a while, I'm sure. I want to switch gears, Paul, and kind of talk about, we're the Regen Brands podcast, right? You've had all the success in food service. Your D2C operations are killer, but you've now created a brand. You've created the packaging. You've gone out and talked to retailers. You've got kind of some larger scaled retailers coming with a rollout. So can you just share like what's that process been like? What's been fun? What's not been fun? What have you learned? What's been surprising as you like build a CPG brand or a retail brand?
There's so much that you can talk about. Like, I really enjoyed the process so far. One of the things that I'm seeing in the space a lot is potentially like a move away from attribute marketing. I don't know if everybody's going to know what I mean by that, but the meat space is particularly guilty of going into attribute-based marketing, which is your core claims in chicken, right? So you have cage-free, free range, organic, and there's like this temptation to make regenerative just another attribute with just another certification. And it's like, I feel like consumers are asking for more. Like, I really think consumers want story more than just sticker now. And so we try to really focus with our packaging on like, yeah, whatever, pasture raised would be like our core attribute, I guess. But I just want to elevate it above that and like tell a bigger story and kind of explain how these things are connected. And it's like, it's hard to do that on one package or on one like point of sale display within a store. But I do think consumers are starving for that. Like, you walk through the chicken aisle in the Walmart or even in, you know, Whole Foods, and it's just like, bro, it's just like bright, shiny, clear, you know, bright green attributes. And it's like, you know, certified this, certified that, certified blah, 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 like all the different attributes. And you basically shop by attribute. It's like, I don't know. I think people are exhausted. I don't even think people know what any of these certifications mean anymore. And it's just like, it looks like the side of a NASCAR truck where, I don't know. I kind of hope that, like, I understand the efforts to codify regenerative and build like these certifications around regenerative, but I think I think it falls short of the full regenerative story, which is like actually getting out and telling a bigger story. And like, brands have this unbelievable opportunity to tell a big story in this space. And I think that we're going to really try to do that, as opposed to just slapping attributes on and like hoping that carries the brand, you know?
When you say you're going to try to do that, yeah, that's my first question. How do you plan to do that, especially in the retail space? Like DTC, you've got that opportunity. Food service, I'm not exactly sure what that looks like whether it's a menu blurb or not. But yeah, in the retail space specifically, how do you tell that story?
So we went really light on like certifications intentionally. Like, we could get, I'm not going to name them, but like we could have gotten pretty much all the certifications out there, but we either have them and we're not putting them on pack, or we're putting them like on the back, or we're putting them on our website or whatever, because I don't want it to be about that. You know, like when you look at a package, whatever it is, they say it's like 3 seconds or 4 seconds or whatever. instead of guiding people straight into looking for the attribute that they're used to, we really tried to like build romance copy on the front, condense. Like we worked with Pearl Fisher in New York, which is, I think it's like the best branding agency in the country. And they had the same vibe. They're like, okay, how do we get a story across in 3 seconds? And a lot of that is the brand aesthetic and like the intentionality that went into the logo and like the mark. And we talk about, instead of putting what you'd expect, which would be like pasture raised regenerative, we said at the very top of the packaging, we said mobile coops and daily rotation, which both of those, like, it's not what you're looking for, you know, and you're like, wait, what is that? Like, what does that even mean? You know, people don't know. I mean, they're not as into it as you and I are. So we're kind of like, try to surprise people. And then when you open the package, it opens to two full color photos from our actual farm, like not marketing shots, like literally our birds inside of our real coops. And I think even that's going to be like, wait, I would expect in this space, what everybody does, this is where I will knock them, is they'll like take a bird from inside of their coop or their chicken house. They'll bring it out to like a grassy field with like a little stream and like a tree, and then like take their Instagram shot, and then they'll put that bird back in the house, you know? And I'm like, I'm not playing that game. Like, we want to go radical transparency. So we only show photos from real birds inside of our real coops with our real breeds. You know, we like try to make a big point of that, but I think it throws people off a little bit because they're like, oh, why is that bird like inside of a shade structure? Like, why is there a feed pan right there? I thought chickens weren't supposed to eat grain. So it's like trying to break some of these preconceived notions with imagery and with like the romance copy. And I think just not sticking a bunch of attributes all over the package, which is kind of what's natural in this space, you know?
Yeah. I'm curious I mean, number one, that's a bold strategy to try to break out of the certification game right now. But I think you're right. I think consumers are looking for more stories, and they want to be more connected to where their food's coming from, where it's produced, how it's produced. I agree with that sentiment. You mentioned you've got a little bit of retail traction so far, Jimbo's and a couple other, you know, Oliver's, things like that. Are you aware of what your performance is like versus the rest of the category with that strategy, or is it still sort of too new to really understand how you're performing relative to the competition?
Yeah, let's do another one of these in a year, because it's like hitting shelves in the next couple of weeks kind of thing. So I'll be able to tell you, you know, we have really good feedback from in-store managers and buyers and stuff like that. But, you know, nothing matters until you put it in the store. And then a big piece is price point too. So it's like, how do you come in from a pricing strategy? I mean, poultry is like a really price sensitive space, especially the fresh case. You know, when you go into your value add products, it's a little easier to margin up. But like in the fresh space, you know, the difference of $1 a pound is like everything. So we were real intentional about how we went in on a pricing strategy. We really wanted to be somewhere between the free range and organic. You know, we want to be in between those two. Whereas like traditionally pastured poultry is shot 2x on organic, you know, and it's like that just, it's cool and you got to do what you got to do, but it prices so many people out, where like we're trying to come in kind of at or slightly below the organic price. And I think that that's going to help people to kind of make that transition from free range and jump up. Or even like, I think we'll get some people that are in organic barn raised birds and they actually save a buck and they drop into something that's really pasture raised and like working towards regenerative too, you know?
I think that's a great call out. And we saw that trend happen with beef. You know, people started to focus more on grass-fed beef versus organic beef because they realized, you know, you could get organic feedlot beef, you know, getting organic grains that they're not supposed to eat, or something that's moving on pasture, eating grass, and that's going to be a healthier animal, and that's what I want consumers to support. So I think that's a really cool sweet spot you identified.
We'll see. I mean, like you said, nothing matters until you get into the store and you get a month or two of turns and velocity. And it's like, there's also, you guys both know this. I mean, you're retail guys. So it's like, I'm learning so much about the ad cycle and how the calendars work. And it's like, when do you go on sale or do you go on sale? And it's like, I'm a rookie with all that. You know, I'm a guy that's way more comfortable like on farm than I am having some of these conversations. But you know, that goes back to building a team too. So we have some really great people involved that know that world too. So
good.
Awesome.
Good. And Paul, with all the growth you've had, we were talking tech, we're talking scale, we're talking significant business transitions. I mean, you've needed capital to do all of it. You mentioned the angel round that kind of started you off. You mentioned the Perdue acquisition, but just take us through that full arc and maybe kind of how the capital has come together and like what commercial traction you've created from each kind of round of capital.
Yeah, for sure. So we had kind of like a concept for scaling Pasture, and we entered some business plan competitions back in like 2014 or 2015. It was like, we just wanted to get some reps in before going and doing like a full, Series A or pitch deck or whatever. And we won some of these business plan competitions, and then we got invited up to the Pasadena Angels, which is like a local angel group out here in SoCal. Mm-hmm. We just thought it would be some good pitching practice kind of thing. And they were kind of like, look, you're probably not going to get through on your first time or whatever. So we ended up getting through on our first time, and we had a $250K check sitting in front of us, like pre-revenue for Pasturebird. And it was like, okay, like let's just kick this thing off with a bang, And this was like, remember, this is 2015. So it wasn't like the frothy environment that it is now, And so it was like, dude, that's crazy. Yeah. Like, let's go for it. And so we split the two businesses legally. We put the money into Pasture, and probably rolled with that 250, like break even and even slightly profitable until we really decided to push the gas on. And there was like a proof of concept. And so then I think we went back and we did probably a total of about 2 million. It was always within that same angel group. We added like one or two Z here or there, but everybody just re-upped the whole time. Couple $1 million total over the course of 3 or 4 years prior to acquisition. We never even went to a Series A. It became real clear that it didn't make any sense for us to try to grow a bunch of revenue as an independent poultry company where we're buying chicks and feed and processing all off the shelf, and we're like so not vertically integrated. It was either, look, go raise like $100 million, equity and debt round and go put up your own manufacturing or buy a plant or whatever, kind of like what some others in this space have done. Or yeah, exactly. Cooks had kind of went that route, where it was either go that route or team up with somebody who's already in the space. And like I said, I thought it would be a West Coast poultry brand, but in about 2018, Ryan Perdue, who's actually like the 4th generation, he lives in LA and he runs the pet division of Perdue, and he is actually really interested in regenerative just as his own thing. He came out as a connection to one of our investors, kind of like asked insanely intelligent questions to the point where we're like, what the heck, bro? Like, you're obviously you've been thinking about this.
Who is this guy?
Yeah, what in the world, And we just got to know him. We kind of like enjoyed just the relationship there or whatever. And then they became an investor in our very last round. And about 6 months later, we got to know the executive team, and like we really got to know the Nyman Ranch acquisition, which was done in 2012. That was a big deal for us because if we were going to work with these guys, this is like our baby, and I care about this way more than just the financial impact of it. Like, I got to know that whoever we team up with is going to do it justice and like take it and really run with it and let us stay as part of the vibe too. So we got really comfortable with the team. I think they got comfortable with us, and it was just like, bro, this thing plugs in so good to what they're already doing. Perdue is the largest certified organic producer in the country. They've pioneered like the no antibiotics thing. They acquired Nyman and did a really great job with that acquisition, I think. They're also Panorama Meats. A lot of people don't know that, but that's one of the largest pasture-raised certified organic beef companies in the country. And so it was really clear, if we're going to work with somebody, we want to do Perdue. Yeah, NorCal, and they're also in the Midwest a bit too. Really, really great, really great production. Yeah. So it was
shout
just
out to Perdue Farms, man,
clear.
for really doing this. Like, for real, like, let's give them their flowers. Like, that's awesome. Like, thank you, Perdue Farms, for leading the way. Like, we need better animal ag, and like they have put their money where their mouth is. So like, shout out to Perdue Farms. That's awesome.
It's not easy, dude. Like, they're really in the trenches with this thing, and it's expensive and it's hard, and it's like, it would have been way easier for them to just take their stationary houses, plant some pasture outside, take some of those same pictures that everybody else does, and just call it regenerative and pasture raised. And like, they're not doing that, bro. And like, I really respect that,
That's really cool. So, you mentioned the retail foray is just beginning. I'm curious, like, what else is in the future for Pasturebird in terms of like products? Like, how many SKUs do you have at retail right now? Are you looking to bring more products to market in different formats? And then from a retail perspective, like, what's the growth curve look like? Like, how many doors do you think you can support today? How many will you be able to support next year? And, kind of walk us through that future outlook.
Yeah, so we open with 6 SKUs. It's a really traditional, like fresh chicken case, whole log, boneless breast, boneless thigh, drumstick, chicken tenders, and the chicken wings. That's like your really normal set that you would put up into retail, and that's what we wanted to open with. Like
Yeah.
it feels like a space within the retail shelf that has like little to no innovation, and a place where you can make a splash, and a place where like Perdue, I mean, they really play there. So we wanted to leverage that. We're definitely, online retail has been massive for us too. So we're like not forgetting about our
Mhm.
food service or online retail, and we're doing some pretty innovative products for online retail, either through pasturebird.com, or we have a lot of online retail partners as well. So
Mhm.
that should all be hitting within like this year, 2022 calendar year. But the focus is definitely going to be on getting a branded retail program out to like as many doors as we can support. So I actually don't even know the exact number of doors that we're in or working towards, but the vision is, moving up to that like million birds a week is the true target. That
Mhm.
affects, in rotation, something like 50,000 acres. It would be like
Wow.
10,000 acres at a time, kind of poultry, but we really see this as like an integrated system with cropland. So 50,000, 100,000 acres. Georgia feels like a great place to pioneer this. It lets us go 12 months a year production. There's lots of cropland that needs nutrient badly. A lot of that good
Mm.
sandy soil, which works really well for us as opposed to like the heavy clay soils. So it really feels like we can make a mark. And a million birds a week is tiny, bro. I mean, chicken's huge. That's one
Mm.
exciting thing about this category is it's like 9 billion birds a year domestically. And
Jeez,
again, do the math,
insane.
like 2.5 pounds of chicken shit per bird. So, you times that out, the
Mhm.
amount of opportunity that lies within the chicken space to like move that chicken manure over croplands is just
Mm.
insane. So like we would like to find a financial model that really works, that really pays the bills, where it's operating, fully in the black. And it's like, we can take this out. We can heal a lot of cropland in this integrated system. So think about, 1,000 acre cotton farm. Our vision is really to
Mhm.
put like 200 of that into poultry for 3 years,
Mhm.
transition it to organic during that time, and then move on to the next 200 acres and plant your cotton and your cotton rotation behind that. And I really think that there's pilots of that are going to work. I'm really excited for that.
Mhm.
That's so cool. And I mean, I can just tell by your level of excitement about the impact you can make seems to be the
Yeah.
thing that you're most excited about. It's not the number of doors, it's not
Mm.
about the financials, it's about like how big an impact this business can have on the environment. And that's so cool to see. And I think that I think it's one of the largest from a land usage perspective in the United States. It's one of the biggest ones out there and it's typically like very degrading the way it's used. So to kind of pair what you're doing with cotton production, I think is incredible and it's really like inspiring to see that we can make that kind of change at that scale. So I mean, good for you.
And it's
It's
not
really
limited to
cool to
cotton;
hear.
it's any broadacre crop. It's like we're on another farm in
Mhm.
Georgia that it's been in hay for 30 years. So it's a cow calf
Mm.
guy. He runs like
Hmm.
400 pairs, 500, 700 acres, something like that. And he's always maintained a hay field, a couple 100 acre hay field to like feed his animals through the winter. And in order to keep that
Mm.
hay in production, like he's going with synthetic fertilizer. But ever since bringing in the
Mm.
poultry, it's nuts, bro. Like I've posted some videos to my LinkedIn about this green
Mhm.
fertility strip that like comes in behind the chicken, and he has not had to use synthetic fertilizer for like 2 years ever since he started this program. So I'm like, there's so many applications when you get the thing to
So cool.
scale. Whereas like
Mhm.
before, when you're moving 100 birds at a time, that's dope. Like I love it, but you're not able to like impact cropland. Whereas now with
Mhm.
scale, we can start to actually have a big impact on that.
Yeah.
Totally. And I'm really curious from like a financial impact for him. How much would he typically spend on those chemical inputs and how much, I mean, do you lease the land from him during that time period or does he not charge you because you're fertilizing his fields? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it varies quite a bit year by year on what he spends. But, so the delta is like he was spending before and now we're paying him. So it's like you're like making it up. You're saving money, but then he's also putting money in his pocket too. And it's like it feels like a regenerative solution. You know what I'm saying? It's like a win-win.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And it's about giving more producers like a key turn solution like that. That's like, hey, we have this piece of technology that allows 100%. You to do this, instead of just like saying, hey, dude, why don't you do a chicken operation? And then he's got to do 1,000 things to enable that. It's like, no, dude, we got a turnkey deal here. You just put the keys in the car, start the ignition, and hit the gas pedal.
I mean, I feel like we're close to that. We've iterated this automated range coop for, I don't know, 5 years. It's been like in the works. It feels like it's where it is ready to like mass produce. But then every time it's like you find a little thing here or there. But no, it's very close, bro. Like I think it is ready to scale, and people are really excited about it. Like the funnest thing to me is when you see, Perdue guy or like an old school chicken guy when they walk into the house and it's like it smells really good, it looks good, the birds are all running around and foraging, and it's like, you see the spot right behind from yesterday and you see all the shit on the ground and it's like all nice and fresh in there. And it's like it's just this mind-blowing thing for somebody who's grown up for 40 years with 40 parts per million ammonia, and it's like you're just used to that and you don't even think twice, and then you see this and you're like, whoa, this feels like the future and the past, to your point, Kyle.
Love it.
Super cool.
Dude, this has been amazing. Let's wrap up with our last question, which is what we ask everybody, which is just, how do we get to Regen Brands having 50% market share by 2050? What do we have to do to enable that?
We just, there's probably good stuff shared on this all the time, but what I would key in on is like, as producers, we have to meet the consumer in the middle somewhere. And like, I'm not the dude that's going to wait for the government, right? Like I'm not the salvation by legislation, like, oh, bail us out, subsidize us like this and that. No, that's fine, but it's not my vibe. Like, consumers need to spend a little bit more, but producers also need to figure out how to produce in this like accessible, affordable, and that applies to every single, food and fiber product that's out there. So I just think as producers, we have a lot of innovation that can happen that helps us bring this to like that 50% market share. Like you just said, I love that target. Like that's pretty audacious, right? But I think asking the consumer to bear the whole burden is really unfair by just paying more, And I think waiting for the government to solve this for us is like going to take several lifetimes too. So I really think as producers and as brands also, but really like on the producer side, there's so much room for innovation for us to like crack this nut too,
Yeah, agreed. That's an interesting perspective. I don't think out of all the answers we've heard so far, you're the first to mention like the onus the producers need to take on to make this accessible, to make it scalable, because, it's great if, the top 1% of earners can afford regenerative organic food. That's awesome. But Is that going to be what moves the needle?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
And we have to enable them to be comfortable with trial and error, right? Just like we said, enable them with the technology. It's like, we're not going to get this right the first time. We're not going to get it right the 100th time, right? We got to enable people to have the means or the bandwidth, whatever it is, to just try until they do get it right.
100%.
Right on. Well, Paul, man, it's been a pleasure to meet you. Really cool to hear your story. Love everything you do in Pasturebird. This has been great. Anthony, anything else you want to close with?
No. Paul, where can people find more information on y'all's work, and where can people find you guys?
Check out pasturebird.com. We've done a lot of work on the website recently, and like there's some pretty cool stuff happening on there. And then for me, I'm not really too into the social media thing. I just pretty much put stuff on LinkedIn, and that's it for me. So if you want to connect, that's a good spot.
Yeah. You are the man, brother. Appreciate you, Mucho. Thank you so much. You're doing amazing stuff.
You guys too, man. Thank you.
For show notes and more information on our guests and what we discuss on the show, check out our website, regen-brands.com. That is regen-brands.com. You can also check out our YouTube channel, Regen Brands Podcast, for all of our episodes with both video and audio. The best way to support our work is to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to future episodes. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Regen Brands Podcast, brought to you by the Regen Coalition and Outlaw Ventures. We hope you learned something new in this episode, and it empowers you to use your voice, your time, and your dollars to help us build a better and more regenerative food system. Love you guys.